This is Simon Rosenberg from Hopium Chronicles. This is our monthly gathering of our plucky community from folks all around the country. I'm really grateful for you all being here. We try to get together once a month, all of us together, to talk about politics and what we're doing to get folks elected. We've had a good couple weeks, and I think, we had a big win in Florida last week. Many of you worked to help Tom Keene get elected in that Florida House special. It was another one of those races, like everything since in the last couple of years, where Democrats have overperformed and Republicans have struggled. And it's why I'm so optimistic about this next race that we're focusing on here at Hopium Chronicles, the fight to reclaim New York 3, George Santos's former seat. And we've got a great candidate who's with us tonight, Representative Tom Suozzi, who's longtime Democratic leader in that area. He was a member of Congress. He's very well suited to take this back in what has been a tough run for us in this part of the country in recent years. Tom is the first poll that we've seen, has him up 3 points, close competitive race, but it's one of these races. We've been seeing this all across the country, Tom, the last few months, which is that when we have these kind of numbers, if we do the work, we win. And the key now is to make sure that Tom has the resources he needs to finish strong here. Many of you are already showing in the chat the work that you're doing, either postcarding or phone calling or texting for Tom for wherever you are. It's been a national effort to get him to help win this race. And I'm just really proud of him because he's off to a very strong start. So Tom, let me turn it to you. Give us an update on the race. I know you're working your butt off, and tell us how it's going, and we'll get to a few questions at the end.
Well, thank you, Simon. And I just want to first say thank you to everyone. You guys are awesome. Simon, you're awesome. Your team is awesome. Hopium is awesome. You've raised tens of thousands of dollars for me already. You've done thousands of postcards and phone calls, and I know this networks from across the country. Someone just said I have to look up at the camera, so I can't look down at the chat anymore. But I was looking at the chat before.
I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to turn it off.
I saw someone from Lincoln, Massachusetts. My sister lives up in Lincoln, Massachusetts. He's a Unitarian minister up there. But I want to thank all of you for everything you're doing. I need you. This is a very difficult race. I want to be very sober. I'm not going to treat this as a rally. We got a lot of work to do over the next 3 weeks. And I don't underestimate how powerful you are and the difference that you can make in this race. I have 3 major components. I don't want to bring you down, but this is a tough seat. I want you to be sober about this. We have a Democratic registration advantage. Biden won by 8 points back in 2020. But this seat has 3 major components: the town of Oyster Bay, the town of North Hempstead, and Northeast Queens. The town of North Hempstead, we lost with a very good candidate in November for the town supervisor, 55 to 45. The town of Oyster Bay, we lost 69 to 31. And Northeast Queens, a city council race, a Trumper city councilwoman, Vicky Palladino, won 60-40. So we've just, this is a tough district. And I've been recruited to run for this seat. I didn't have to go through a primary because the message that I've been running on for a long time. I was mayor of my hometown, the city of Glen Cove, for 8 years. I was the county executive of Nassau County for 8 years. I was a member of Congress for 6 years. I'm trained as a lawyer and a CPA, people should know. I worked for Arthur Anderson and Company and Sherman and Sterling and some other stuff. But the message I've been running on for years is, it's not worth being in government or politics unless you're actually solving problems and making people's lives better. And you can't solve problems, especially in the complicated world that we live in. Every problem we face is complicated. Nothing is simple. Anybody says, why don't you just, doesn't really know what they're talking about. To solve a complicated problem, you can't be in an environment of fear and anger. Everybody's just attacking each other, which is much too much of what goes on today, product of our former president, Trump, has helped to cultivate that environment of fear and anger. We have to get people to work across the table, even when they disagree with each other, to try and find common ground to move forward. Not only within our party, from the most progressive to the most moderate person, but also across party lines. And I've tried to do that throughout my career. And that message is resonating with the people I represent, or would like to represent, I should say. If I just run this race and say, I'm Tom Suozzi, I'm the Democrat, and I'm running against the Republican, and Democrats are good and Republicans are bad, I will lose the race. My polling shows that. The races that have been going on here for a while say that. That's not going to be enough for me to win this race. I'm certainly a Democrat. I've always been a Democrat. I've always fought with Republicans, but I've also worked with Republicans and with Democrats and with independents. I've worked with progressives. I've worked with moderates. I've worked with conservatives to try and find out how to find common ground to move forward and solve problems. And everybody on this call, like everybody in the country, like everybody I know, has this nagging feeling that there's something really wrong in our country right now. And they're worried about our country and our world, even between the polls that show that parents are afraid that kids won't be able to live as good a life as they did, won't be able to buy a house, live in the same neighborhood. The cost of living is just too burdensome. People that are concerned about the immigration crisis. You see people streaming across the border and they're worried about the chaos. We had a storm here on Long Island a couple of weeks ago. I was like, is this one of those storms where it's going to be, they say it's once every 10 years or once every 100 years, but it really is happening all the time now. And, my next door neighbor's property flooded, and the South Shore, we saw the beaches eroding, and we saw a couple towns, Freeport and Lindenhurst, flooding again. This summer, I don't know about where you live, but where I live, we had smoke coming down from Canada. And I remember thinking to myself, what if this goes on for like a month or 2 months? What would we do? I mean, it's in Canada and it's affecting us here. But we have all these different issues. What's going on in Israel, and what's going on in the Ukraine, and is Putin really trying to annex the country next door, like Hitler did during World War II? This is right out of the history books. Is he going to try and take over and then take over the next place and then take over the next place? We see these polls about our kids and social media, and when I was growing up, when you were growing up, we had to compare ourselves to other people in the neighborhood or our classroom or the little league team. Now kids have to compare themselves to everybody in the world every day. And you wonder why everybody's so anxious. So all these things are happening. And then we look to Congress, they look and say, okay, Congress, what are you doing to help us? Oh, we're going to kick the speaker out. We can't do a budget. We're threatening to shut the government down again. We're not going to negotiate an immigration deal, even though the Senate is trying to negotiate an immigration deal. And the president's willing to make compromise to negotiate an immigration deal. Best time in 35 years to finally fix this thorny problem that we've had for 35 years. It's gotten worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. We can finally address it. The moment is right. And the Speaker Johnson says, oh, I want to wait and see if President Trump gets elected. I want to wait till we win the majority in the House. I want to win the Senate too. Let's say he's right, which God forbid he's right, but let's say he gets what he wants. Under no scenario will we get 60 votes. Will they get 60 votes in the Senate? So no matter what, it'll have to be a bipartisan deal. You'll never be able to do a bipartisan deal on the crazy deal that they're proposing now with the HR2 legislation. So you have to compromise, and it has to happen now. So I love our country. I love our system. I love the people on this call that you're actually participating the way you are, even though it's not in your district, it's not in your neighborhood. It makes a big difference. I've built a lot of coalitions with people in this race. I've got tough neighborhoods like Levittown. Okay, I've asked the carpenters to run Levittown for me. I've got the international president of the carpenters coming on February 3rd. Doug McCarron is going to have 800 carpenters going door to door in Levittown. I've got the electricians doing Massapequa. These are like right out of the 1950s suburbia, very Trumpy type country. But the electricians, my grandfather was an electrician in the IBEW. He put the lights on top of the Empire State Building. Almost 50 years he was in the IBEW. But the electricians are going to do Massapequa for me. And the teachers are going to do Syosset and Jericho and Woodbury and Plainview and Old Bethpage. And the SEIU is going to help me in Westbury and Newcastle. But there's other places where I've got a strong Democratic organization, and other places where I have volunteers that have helped me for years. And then I've got you. You're my secret weapon, who are sending in postcards and making phone calls and raising money and making a difference. And I need you, and I'm grateful for you. And we can win this race. We're ahead right now. They're beating the you-know-what out of me on TV, spending millions of dollars, really being very unfair in what they're doing. But I guess we're used to that after all these years. But we're going to win this race, because the message I'm pushing is we've got to work together to solve problems that affect real people's lives. And people are hungering for that right now. They've had it with the fighting and the finger pointing and even the partisanship. We've got to move beyond that and move into problem solving and helping people. And, we can't negotiate with everybody. You can't negotiate with Marjorie Taylor Greene. You can't negotiate with Lauren Boebert or Matt Gaetz. But there are a lot of good people on both sides of the aisle I think we've got more on our side than their side, certainly, but we've got to try and move past our vitriol and start working for the people again. Okay, so I've spoken for way too long.
No, Tom, that was great. Thank you, Congressman. And I will say that for those of you who are motivated, I can see in the chat that on our site where you registered for this event tonight is information about how you can volunteer and donate. We have raised over $30,000, our community, for the Congressman. We need to keep raising more. We raised a few thousand today, but there's information on how you can make calls, you can text, you can canvass, you can postcard on our site. And I also know some of you are filling in. Susan Wagner, I know, is on, who's been also sure, getting people information that they need tonight. Susan, thanks for being in the chat and helping folks. Yeah, there's a link to
Let me give a
postcard.
shout out to Susan also, who I think introduced us to Simon.
Yeah.
Susan, thank you so much. Susan and I worked together when I was the Nassau County executive, and she was the deputy controller for Howard Weitzman. And she's always been a good person who really genuinely cares, and grateful to her for her help.
Yeah, this painting behind me here is something she is from Susan, a present that I got from her a few months ago. And
Wow.
yeah, I know she's an artist too. I don't know if you knew that, but she's
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Susan's a great friend, and she's one of the amazing people I've met along the way. So, Tom, let me ask you, when you say things are going well, I mean, I've seen your social media feed. I mean, you've been doing a lot of events that look like you have a lot of volunteers. What's it like out there? How does it feel right now? I know it's been in the winter, it's cold, right?
Whenever I talk to people, I'm like, there's no way I'm going to lose this race. I mean, it's like we are on fire, and I've got a very positive reception from people. I feel very, very good about it. And not only my personal anecdotal stuff, but our polling shows that people that support me are more energized than people that support my opponent. She's got a block of people that are really intense in favor of her, but because she's refusing to debate, she's refusing to do public events. She only does scripted events like Republican rallies. She's not doing any town halls or civic meetings or any debates, like I said. She's relying on the Republican machine in Nassau County. The machine in Nassau County is very strong. It was once the strongest Republican machine in America. When I first became Nassau County executive and Susan was working for the guy who was elected controller, I was the first Democrat with the Democratic legislature since 1917. It was like the Chicago Democrats and the Nassau County Republicans. Maybe you could put in the Orange County Republicans in California as well. And we took the wind out of their sails, and we beat them for years. But now they're back to full strength, and they require their employees in the town of Oyster Bay, the town of North Hempstead, the town of Hempstead, the largest town in America, County of Nassau, to show up on the streets every weekend. So every time I start feeling good and enthusiastic about what people are saying, I remember that I'm up against a really tough machine that's been winning a lot over the past 3 years. And so we just can't take our foot off the pedal. And I'm working like a dog. I'm raising the money. I'm going to do the air campaign with the TV and the mail and the digital. But we got to do the ground campaign. And that's why these partnerships I talked about with the labor unions or the environmental groups. I was the New York State Environmentalist of the Year for all of New York State. I was endorsed by every environmental group. I'm endorsed by every Democratic organization you can think of, from Planned Parenthood to the Human Rights Campaign I've got an F rating from the NRA. I got all the great credentials, but we just got to keep on working. And the folks on this call are an important part of our ground campaign. And that one-on-one outreach makes a difference.
Yeah, Tom, I mean, one of the reasons our turnout has been so strong across the country in the early vote and all these elections we've been winning is because of all these folks like who are here tonight and who are part of organizations across the country who, when they call and they text and they postcard, right, they're just talking to Democrats to get them to vote, right? And it's been very effective in these special elections and these lower turnout elections where it's really, you've got to reach across the aisle, but we also need to get the Democrats who are there to show up.
Oh, yeah.
And this is where this community, I think, is this extra muscle that we never had before, right?
Well, I can look out ahead of me if I know that people have my back behind me. Yeah. And they're filling in for me, so I can go out and reach out a little bit further, because we got to go, go. And if we have good Democratic turnout and we pick up a 50% of the independents, we pick up a few Republicans, we win this thing, and we win it big. So we have to, but we have to get the Democratic turnout as well. And what I'm finding, we all hear all the time, we got to get the base out, we got to get the base out, we got to get the progressives out, we got to get the young people out. And I've been doing this for a long time, but my polling and my conversation shows it's a lot of the moderate Democrats that are not voting because they're just so fed up with everything. So we got to get them out to vote.
Yeah.
And we can remind them this is how important this election is. And so that's something we're focusing on as well. So we got to get everybody. We got to build a big coalition of people. And well, let me ask some more questions. I could keep on talking forever. So
Yeah, no, I know. I'm from New York too, Tom, right? We're good at talking, New Yorkers is that, I was born in Manhattan and I had family in Europe. I have some distant cousins and so on in your district.
well, you better call them up. I'm not kidding.
I
I'll
need to
call them up.
reconnect with them.
Text
I
me their
know.
phone number. I'll call them up myself.
Listen, I'm going to let you go. We promised we'd keep it to about 20 minutes. I mean, I'm just really proud of you. I think this race, the polling is very encouraging. Look, I've been working in races all across the country the last couple of years. The polling we're seeing here that we have today, and that he's seen his private polling, it's very simple. If he has the money and we do the work, we're going to win.
Yeah.
And that's why it's critical for everyone who's watching right now, either live or when you watch the recording over the next few days, go to the Hopium site. There's links for how you can donate and how you can volunteer. We just got to do the work and we're going to have another win, and we're going to narrow that Republican margin in the House down by a little bit more, right? Which puts pressure on them, frankly, to work across the aisle to get things done with us. I mean, this actually will help us, I think, get things done in Congress this year, despite the unwillingness of the Republicans to play ball. This puts more pressure on them to do deals with us and get things done. And so it can also help unlock some of the agenda that we need to pass this year. As Tom pointed out, we know we don't have crazy ambitions. We want to get budget deals done. We want to get a simple immigration deal done. We should fund
Get the
Ukraine
child
and
tax
Israel.
credit deal done.
Yeah, and that looks promising, right? I mean, there are a handful of things that we really need to get done. Winning this race will make all of that more likely, right? And that's what's good for the country. It's good for the Democratic Party. We got the guy who's going to carry it. Tom, any final parting words before you go?
Don't underestimate how powerful you all are. I always like to tell the story from the Middle Ages when they're building one of the great cathedrals in Europe. And there's three masons are working at the site. And a guy walks over and he talks to the three masons. He goes to the first guy. He says, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well, I'm a bricklayer. I lay brick. That's what I do." He goes to the second guy. He's doing the same thing as the first guy. He says, "Well, what are you doing?" He says, "Well, I'm a mason. I'm a bricklayer. I'm building a wall." He says, "Oh." He goes to the third guy who's doing the exact same thing as the first guy and the second guy. He says, "Well, what are you doing?" He says, "I am building a cathedral." And that's how you build something big and beautiful, is brick by brick by brick, phone call by phone call by phone call, postcard by postcard by postcard, small dollar donation by small dollar donation. That's how we build something big and beautiful that is the United States of America and a better world. And your bricks that you're laying every single day are what it takes to build something beautiful. And I'm so grateful to all of you for everything you're doing. Let's keep on laying those bricks. Let's win this race and let's fix our country. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, Tom. Good luck, brother. And
Thank you, man.
we'll see you on the other side as a congressman. We'll have you
All your
back.
cousins.
Okay.
I'm not
Thank you.
kidding. Thank you.
Okay, I got to dig them up. And thank you. Good luck.
Suozzi bringing families back together.
Okay, see you, Tom. Okay, everybody, that was fun. And thank you for all the comments and the donations and the willingness to go to work that I just saw here tonight. Tom, you could see he was fascinated by all the activity that was going on. I mean, it is amazing, right? We're living in a new world where no matter where you live, you can help and win these swing races. As part of why our party is doing so well. And so thanks to all of you. Let me get to the overview. There's a lot going on. It's been a busy couple of weeks. And so let me give you my quick, maybe 15 minutes, and then we'll have some questions into where we are now in the 2024 election. You all know that if you follow Hopium, that my basic take on the world these days is that Joe Biden's been a good president. The country is better off. The Democratic Party is strong in winning elections all across the country. And they have Trump. And Trump we've been reminded just in the last few days that he's the most unfit person to ever run for president in all of our history. And all of that together makes me very optimistic about what's going to happen this year. And let's go through it one by one. Joe Biden is a good president, the country's better off first. Listen, we all know that if you think back to January of 2021, right, we were in the middle of COVID was raging. We were in a deep recession. We had just had an insurrection against the United States, and this capital city was in lockdown, military occupation, right? To think about where we were then and how far we've come, it's remarkable. And Joe Biden's central promise to us when he ran for president in 2020 was that he was going to get us to the other side of COVID successfully. And that's what he's done. I mean, he's kept his central promise to all of us. Our COVID recovery has been better. Our economic recovery has been better than any other G7 in the country. Inflation, which was a global phenomenon, is lower here than any other advanced economy in the world. We know that the growth that we've had continues to be remarkably strong. GDP growth in the third quarter was 4.9% in last year. We have the best job market that we've had since the 1960s. Real wage growth has continued to be at wage growth has been at a very elevated level, has been new business formations and worker participation rates. We have the lowest uninsured rate in American history, and ACA signups set a record this year. All three stock market indices are now in record territory. The deficit is trillions less than it was when Biden came to office. You know, by virtually every measure that you can put forward, right, we are better off today. And inflation, as all of you know, which was a thing that was, we had this huge inflation spike in 2022 due to COVID and the Russian invasion of Ukraine and OPEC raising prices, that inflation has come way down now. It's down to pre-pandemic levels, and prices of many things, mortgages, rents, food, are plummeting now. We've also seen the crime rate, which has been very central to the dialogue in the United States, has came way down in 2023. We had one of the fastest dropping murder rates than we've had in all of American history. And crime rates in the US, violent crime rates, are half of what they were 30 years ago. We're far safer today than we were as a country. We also know that one of the major issues Republicans attack Biden on all the time is this war on energy that he's waged. We had more domestic oil produced in 2023 than any year in American history or in any country in the history of the world. And we had more renewable production here. And so if it was a war on energy, he was doing a pretty poor job, given that we actually produced more both oil and renewables last year than in any year in American history, making us far more energy independent than we've been in decades. So when I look at where all of this together, I think Joe Biden is going to have a very strong case for re-election. The country is clearly better off. We've started seeing consumer sentiment start to catch up with the economic realities. We also know, though, and I want to spend a moment talking about this, that when you break down these questions around the economy, when you go deeper into the questioning, as Tom Bonnier and I did around polling in 2022, what you see when you ask people about their life satisfaction, their job satisfaction, their income satisfaction, we're up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. There's broad satisfaction in the country with people's life and work and incomes. We also saw in a poll that Axios did just this week, when you ask questions about people's personal finances, not about the economy, but how are they doing? Again, very strong numbers, 50s, 60s, 70s, people very optimistic about what's going to happen with the economy this year in 2024. And we also know that this feeling about the economy that we hear about so much, people being down on it, is not based on lived experience. And I know there's an argument in our family, this is all based on lived experience. It isn't. And the way that we know that is that Democrats view Biden's job, view his management of the economy very positively, 3-2, 3, 4-1. They view the economy as being very strong. It's Republicans in MAGA that have a negative view about the economy, which has taken down the overall average numbers. And so it can't be lived experience if Democrats think everything is going well and Republicans think things are going poorly. Paul Krugman had a great piece in the New York Times about this just a few days ago, where he said when you look at all this, it really is, MAGA basically giving Trump, Biden a 0 on everything, which has pulled the numbers down. So I'm very confident, as somebody who's been doing this for over 30 years, that we're going to have a very strong case to make to the American people for our reelection, and that Joe Biden is going to be able to make the case that he's been a good president. This is job one, in my view. We'll be learning more about his second term agenda in the coming months. We have the State of the Union in early March. My expectation is that he'll be laying out an aggressive agenda and making it very clear that if you elect him for 4 more years, here are the things that you're going to get. I've got a piece coming out on that in the next couple of weeks in the New Republic, which will help hopefully inform that discussion and debate. And so starting with the first part of my tripartite thing that I have is that Joe Biden's been a good president, the country's better off. Second, the Democratic Party. We just keep winning. I mean, we won in 2018, we won in 2020. And what was supposed to happen after we won the presidential in 2020 was that traditionally what happens in the modern era of American politics is the party in power loses seats. We lose the midterms, we lose the off-year elections, and power erodes and moves to the other party. This is sort of a natural ebb and flow that's happened throughout almost all of modern American history. It has not happened in this cycle. I want to be very clear. Something deeply anomalous is happening in our politics, which is this normal party in power, losing seats across the country, losing ground politically, has not happened. We've actually gained ground both in 2022 and in 2023. In 2022, in the battleground states, we actually improved our standing over 2020 in Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Minnesota, Michigan, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania. We got to 59% in Colorado, 57% in Pennsylvania, 55% in Michigan, 54% in New Hampshire. Those are extraordinary performances in a good year. And this was a midterm election, party in power, low Biden approval, high inflation, right? And we made extraordinary strides, right? We gained a Senate seat. We gained 4 state legislative chambers. We gained 2 governorships net. We lost the House, but we kept it close enough that it's going to make it far easier for us to win in 2024. We actually came within a few thousand votes of having kept the House. So a remarkable performance for us in 2022. And the question when I began Hopium at the beginning of 2023 was, would that basic dynamic that we had seen since Dobbs carry it through into the next year, into the next set of elections in 2023? And it did, right? We all went to work in various elections, but if you look at starting with the Wisconsin Supreme Court seat that we flipped in April, which has now given us ideological control of the court, which is going to make sure that we undo the ridiculous and rancid gerrymandering in Wisconsin, some of the worst in the country. We flipped Jacksonville and Colorado Springs in the spring, 2 of the largest Republican-held cities in America. We then won in Ohio by getting 57% in that August initial ballot initiative, which was a remarkable showing for us, in a tough state that we haven't done well in. And then we won in Ohio in the general election with 57% of the vote and restored rights and freedoms to the women of Ohio and ended the 6-week abortion ban there. We also took away the Virginia State House and the hopes and dreams of Glenn Youngkin and others that the 15-week abortion ban would be a safe haven for them. We had a remarkable year. In 2022, as you've heard me say, we did really well we had 2 elections. There was a blue election inside the battleground where we gained ground, outside the battleground where we didn't run these big muscular campaigns like in New York and California. We fell back. So there was good news and so not such good news in 2022. In 2023, we won everywhere. There was no good news for Republicans anywhere. We won, Andy Beshear increased his margin in Kentucky. We won municipalities and city council races and school board races all across the country. This is not supposed to happen when you're the party in power. This was a terrible year, 2023 for MAGA. And I'm just so proud of all of you because all of you played a major role in many of these important victories for us. And it shows that the most powerful force in our politics in this election, as it was in 2018 and 2020 and 2022 and 2023, is fear and opposition to MAGA. And so the question is, would this basic dynamic now carry over to another year, to 2024? And it has. If you look at what's happened over the last few weeks, on the Republican side, Trump's turnout was unbelievably low and anemic in the Iowa caucuses last week. Trump got 56,000 votes out of over 750,000 Republicans, meaning that almost 700,000 Republicans did not vote for Trump, and he only got 56,000 votes, 7% of the total electorate. We saw, and we also saw in, Trump only got 50% of Republicans have voted against Trump, basically in Iowa and New Hampshire. And the thing that is most worrisome to the Republicans, that has to be the thing that is keeping up the real strategists in their party at night, is that you had this data coming out in both Iowa and New Hampshire, where large number of Haley voters said that they would vote for Biden over Trump, which is, we've never seen anything like that before in modern polling. And then also we saw large numbers of Republicans in both states saying that they would view a conviction of Trump as being a disqualifier for president. In Iowa, it was over 30%. And the thing is, the disqualification and the idea that people would run away from him, which we saw in the New York Times polling in October, where when you asked that question and then did a ballot test, Trump lost 8 to 10 points in all the battleground states. Those things have already happened. And so the threat to the Republicans, the risk the Republicans are taking by backing this guy, right, again, who is, who has, and I'll get into it in a second, who has the most unfit person to ever run for office. The data was very clear this last couple of weeks, and you've actually seen a lot of attention to it in the media. I've been a little surprised. I mean, Trump was getting kind of a free ride in my view. He's not anymore. I mean, this stuff is getting openly talked about. Today, Susan Collins said she wasn't going to support Trump for president, even if he's the nominee. And what happened in 2022 in these battleground states is these Trumpy candidates were unable to bring the Republican coalition back together. They bled Republican votes. And you're seeing that already happen now. The Republican Party, I think, when I wrote this today on Twitter, the Republican Party kind of broke a little bit with Dobbs. I mean, it's been unable to do well and perform well, because I think there was something that happened with Dobbs after Dobbs, where even for Republican voters, this party had gone too far, that it had become too ugly and unattractive. And it's struggling to bring along the non-MAGA part of the party. And the problem is the non-MAGA part of the party is 20, 25, 30% of all Republicans. Trump can't lose a single vote and be competitive in 2024. And there's already evidence that he could bleed a huge chunk of the Republican Party. And so when I look at all this, and then the second thing that happened this week that made us during this period in 2024 is that we flipped another seat in Florida in HD 35. Many of you gave money and worked on that race. And so this basic dynamic of their struggle and our overperformance, which has been dominating our politics since the spring of 2022, is already playing out in 2024. And it's a central reason I'm so optimistic about what we're going to be able to do together. And so finally, Trump. We know that this Trump, in my view, is far weaker than the Trump that we saw in 2016 and 2020. He's far more degraded. He's far more extreme. He's far more dangerous. His performance on the stump is far more erratic and unhinged and wild than it was before. He's making unforced errors that cause candidates to lose elections. Things like coming out against the ACA in a year where we're having record signups for the ACA, tens and tens of millions of people's lives have been made better by the ACA. There was no upside for him to do that. That was just an incredible mistake by a candidate who's, I think, not really connected to reality right now. He's also, by claiming so much credit for ending Roe, he's given us video that's going to be devastating for them. They're making enormous mistakes in traditional politics, the kind of things that we can use to knock candidates out and to push them further and further away from the electorate. But in my view, the most important thing in the short term about Trump is I think there are 6 things that people are going to find out about him in the coming months that they didn't know about him in 2020. And let's go through them, right? Because this is really important. And we need to use blunt language to describe this, because it is unprecedented what we're being asked to put up with from the Republican Party. These 6 things that we have to start getting used to talking about are: number 1, a jury of his peers found that he raped a woman in a department store dressing room. 2, that his family committed decades-long financial fraud. And this is something that's already been determined by a court, right, in New York. And New York State is asking for $380 million in penalties and fines. 3, the Colorado Supreme Court has determined that he actually led an insurrection against the United States. And we know that in his own public comments that if he's elected, he wants to finish the job and end American democracy for all time. 4th, he stole America's secrets. He lied to the FBI about it, and we know that he shared those secrets with other people. To me, this may be the single greatest betrayal of the national security of our country in all of our history. Fifth, he and his family have taken billions of dollars from foreign governments, more than any political family in all of American history. And sixth, he ended Roe. He is singularly responsible for stripping the rights and freedoms away of a majority of the population. These six things are not known. They were not part of 2020. They are going to become part of this campaign. Any one of these things could be fatal for him politically. He's got six that he's going to have to overcome. And I just don't think he's going to be able to do it. I don't think he's the same political figure that he was before. His party is splintered. We already know that Trumpy Republicans have a really hard time keeping their coalition together. There's all sorts of bright, flashing signs right now that that's replicating in this climate and early on. His showing in Iowa, New Hampshire was not good, right? Nikki, the polls, by the way, let's go through this. The polls this week were predicting a 20 to 25 point victory for him in New Hampshire. He only won by 11 points. This is consistent with what we've been seeing with MAGA candidates all across the country. That when it comes to actual voting, they underperform because Republicans don't want to vote for these guys anymore, and the party is splintering. The fact, again, I'll end with this, that we have polling now in both Iowa and New Hampshire, and this isn't polling in the country. These are people actually voting. They're seeing ads. They're in the campaign, and that in both states, more Haley supporters said they would vote for Biden in the general election than Trump is extraordinary. And it's why I think when I put all this together, everybody, I just want to say to all of you that I would much rather be us than them. I'm deeply optimistic about what we're going to be able to do. My hope is that together that we can get to 55% and win this election by high single digits and make it seen as a blowout. And that way that what we can do together is to start to make this election a clear repudiation of this horrible politics and this horrible man, and to make it more likely that MAGA starts to loosen its dark grip on the Republican Party. That has to be our aspiration, our goal. I can see it in the data. The data is if you're hearing commentators on television talk about this in ways that you weren't before. I think it's become inescapable when he's leaving the campaign trail and going to court. The commentators can't ignore this anymore. And then to me, the way I think about this, it's like the emperor has no clothes, right? It's the analogy, that old story that we all read as kids and we read to our own kids. Donald Trump has no clothes. The fantasy that this guy's a strong and capable candidate, it's a joke, right? He's weak, he's unfit, he's disgraced, he's despicable, all these things. And we can't yield and give in to this idea that somehow he's a strong and formidable candidate. He isn't. He's the worst candidate for a run for president in all of our history. And we're going to kick his ass together in 2024. Thanks, everybody, very much. Let me go to the Q&A. Those are some initial thoughts I want to hear from all of you. I'm going to jump first into the Q&A box, if I can, and just see what people are chatting about. If you don't mind, if you've got a question, put it in the Q&A box. Yeah, I mean, I mentioned about Trump's deterioration. I mean, his performance on the stump. I mean, you saw it last night. I mean, unfortunately, I had like a 10-minute window where I had to jump and do something last night, and I missed the beginning of his remarks. And I went back and looked at them today, and it is shocking what he did last night. The way this imperial, like, who is this woman who's going to keep running? I mean, the way that he spoke about her, I mean, it was authoritarian, and it's like he clearly thought she was going to concede last night. And part of the reason I think he's so worried is that the longer this election goes on, I mean, her remarks last night were incredible. I'll put them on the Hopium, or a piece of them on the Hopium site tomorrow, where she basically said that MAGA and Donald Trump are losers. They keep losing elections all across the country. She eviscerated him last night. I think he was watching and he was flabbergasted that she didn't bend the knee, particularly because she's a woman of color, and how dare she, challenge the great Donald Trump, right? And given that he had won, even though he's actually not doing all that well in the elections, and has clearly got problems, right? He's a beleaguered candidate. And so yes, I think the longer that he's out there and the more that he has to perform and the more media that he does, the more that people are going to see how unhinged he always was out there, but he's way worse than he used to be. And I want to remind everybody, and I didn't cover this just for time reasons, about how much more extreme his agenda is. I mean, not only has he basically promised that he's going to end American democracy and establish an authoritarian dictatorship in the United States, which I don't know if there needs to be anything else after that, but he's moved he's campaigning to make, the way I like to describe this, he's arguing that he wants the planet to warm faster. He wants more dead kids in schools. He wants to round up immigrants and mass deportation. I mean, if you look at the exit polls last night in New Hampshire, among Republican primary voters, he was underwater on both the rounding up and deporting immigrants and on abortion by substantial margins. I mean, he's occupying space on these issues of climate change, guns, abortion that poll in the 20-30%. And I don't even know if he knows, right? He's become, my friend Greg Sargent described this sort of fake world that they all live in as Foxlandia, right? This imaginary world where Donald Trump is strong and everybody loves him, and that he didn't actually commit all these crimes, and that was a successful president. And there's this imaginary world that they all live in, right? It's on Fox News every day. And none of it's true, right? I mean, he's coming with, part of what's happening is that this Foxlandia world, this imaginary world, this delusional world is now being dragged into court cases, and he's now actually not doing as well in the election as he thought he was going to do. And and that the talking points that Republicans have about Joe Biden are evaporating, right? I mean, inflation is down, the economy is strong, the record oil production, all these things are, the crime rate's coming way down. The only place they really have right now to go is immigration. And immigration has never been an issue that has determined a general election in recent years, because it's an important issue, but people view other things as much more important, healthcare, the economy, jobs, other things. Donald Trump in 2018 ended his closing argument to all of us in the midterm election on the caravan and immigration, and we won the election by 8.5 points, by 8.6%. Immigration is an issue that motivates Republican base voters. It's never worked well in a top tier general election environment. And I know that they want to try to keep it going and all this. We're going to talk more about immigration, but I'm not as worried as many people are about the immigration issue in 2024. One last point, and then I'll go back to questions. Polling, right? I mean, I think we learned in 2022 not to center our understanding of politics around polling. It didn't work very well. And I just want to remind everybody that in the last few weeks, right, just the last few weeks, there have been polls showing Biden ahead of his 2020 results in New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. And that because those polls exist, we can now therefore say, I mean, there are two things, right? There are now series of polls showing Biden doing better than 2020 in major important states in 2024. And a majority of the polls taken in the since Thanksgiving have Biden either even or ahead. Donald Trump is not winning this election today. It's the data is not all pointing in the same direction. For all the polls they show, I can show you other polls showing things that we're doing well. So to me, where things are now, it's just so early, right? They've had an election, we haven't. We're just beginning to engage our coalition. We're going to know a lot more about where things are in probably about a month, in my view, now that people really know and understand that it's Trump versus Biden. I think there is a big chunk of our coalition that's wandering. We need, I think a big chunk of it's going to, or I shouldn't say a big chunk, there is a chunk of our coalition that's wandering. I think most of it will come home once the election really begins and people understand what's at stake. But then we have a campaign to go get the rest. We have a campaign to go get and run up, to try to run up the score and win this election by a lot. And I will say that I think one of the forces in this election that's really going to matter, based on what we're seeing with the splintering of the Republican Party and the inability of MAGA to bring non-MAGA Republicans along with them, is that the never Trumper, never MAGAs, the Liz Cheney, Mitt Romney's, Adam Kinzinger's, and these folks are going to play a really important role in creating permission structure. If they endorse Biden, they come onto the campaign, and I think we have to welcome them in to create a permission structure for other Republicans to say no to Donald Trump and to the Republican Party in 2024. So all of that leaves me very optimistic about where things are. Let me go back into the Q&A and then I'll take a few in-person questions here. There's a lot of, yeah, the UAW endorsement today, Amy, I agree with you, was really impressive. I'm going to put a clip on that in Hopium tomorrow. But Winnie, my old friend, is asking about, young voters, and let me address this. And I wrote about this week, and I think this comes up all the time. And so let me, I need a haircut, by the way. I just want to say that there is, I think that it is unlikely that Israel-Hamas war and Biden's handling of it will be a major part of what happens in the fall. It's unlikely, right? Doesn't mean it won't be. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. Of course it matters. But I showed you this week in Hopium, the Economist YouGov poll, the weekly track, which to me is one of the best and tracks, both in terms of quality and also easiness, accessibility, the ability to understand the data. And among 18 to 29-year-olds in that poll, the number, when you ask most important issue, the number of 18 to 29-year-olds who picked foreign policy was 0, right? And, the healthcare, the economy, other things became more important. It is very unusual for a foreign war like this to become something that is a voting issue for a large number of people in an election. Iraq war was, but our troops were there, right? I mean, Afghanistan was, our troops were there. The war, this is not that case. And I just don't think that for the average 25-year-old, that this is what they're going to be voting on in November of 2024. And we have a very strong case to make to Gen Z, I believe. I think that we have to recognize that for this audience that we're part of at Hopium is that I think there's been much more discourse around this on college campuses than there has been in the broader, youth electorate. And so for those of us who have kids in college, who've been recently in college, this is much more front of mind to them than it would be to somebody who's out in the working world, who's 25, 26 years old, who aren't in a college setting any longer. And so I think we have to not freak out about this. I think we have a lot of work to do with young people. I think that Joe Biden is distant to them, but Joe Biden has delivered for young people in America. I mean, let me just go through my list on this, right? Young people are entering the best job market in America since the 1960s. Fewer young people are uninsured than ever before in American history. Because the minimum wage has been increased all across the country in so many cities and states because of Democrats, young people are entering a job market where the floor on wages is much higher than it would have been otherwise. Biden has has forgiven over $130 billion in student loans, an extraordinary effort to create more economic opportunity for young people. We know based on data from last year that Gen Z homeownership at this age is higher than it was for millennials and for Gen X, in part because young people are making so much more. We know that median wealth among 18 to 34-year-olds doubled from 2020 to 2022. And we also know, there was one more stat that I had, and we also know that Biden's investment agenda is going to be creating economic opportunity for young people for decades to come. Joe Biden he's also obviously a champion of gun safety and climate change and abortion rights and all these other things that really matter to young people. But the case we have to make to young people is very, very strong. Joe Biden has made young people and their issues front and center to his presidency. We will make it front and center to the campaign as well. I do want to give a shout out to Eve Levinson, who is the youth director for Biden-Harris, who's somebody many of you know, who I've been working with closely. We've got a really good initial team in there, and I feel like we're going to help hopefully run the best youth campaign that any presidential campaign has ever seen. I think we have to, because I think there are extraordinary and unprecedented both opportunities and challenges with young people, and that if we can get our margins up and youth turnout up, I think we're going to have a really good election. I'm optimistic that we can do it. Let me go to a few more questions here, and thank you all for for your great questions. Oh, the third party stuff, because this comes up and I didn't get into it. I don't know what's going to happen in third party, right? And I don't think any of us should assume this election is not 2020, 2000 and 2016, it's 2024. No election is like any other election. And so we can't assume that the dynamic that played out in either of those two elections is going to be the dynamic of this election. I think the reason why I'm not as worried about the third party efforts as many other people are is because I think they're all terrible. I think Cornel West is not a serious candidate. I think Jill Stein is, no one's going to take her seriously. And Robert Kennedy, when you spend any time with him and listen to him talk, listen to his arguments, he's very unattractive in my view, regardless of his name. And so I'm not really spooked by any of them. And I also don't know what's going to happen with no labels. We don't really know that they're going to field candidates. And so I don't want to worry about things that I have no control over. What I try to do with all of you in this phrase that we're beginning to use, which is do more, worry less, is not worry about it. The answer to all of it is we got to get Joe Biden's numbers up and we got to join the campaign, donate as I asked you to do today, start rolling up our sleeves and doing the work to drive his numbers up as high as we possibly can and win this election by 8 or 9 points. So none of this third party stuff's going to matter. Don't get spooked by this stuff. There's too much. We are too quick to worry as Democrats. We need to live more in a place where we're strong. We're kicking ass. We've got a strong and good president. They're terrible, right? Whatever the way, the way I center myself every day when I get blown around, when I start feeling like I'm getting blown around by events, I go back to this centering device that I have, which is Joe Biden's a good president. The country's better off. The Democratic Party is strong in winning elections all across the country, and they have Trump. And whenever I feel like I'm getting lost or the blustery right-wing noise machine is pushing me around and I'm starting to get worried about things, I go back to these basic realities. And I don't let things that are outside of my control worry me. It's not worth spending your time in worry. You should do more, worry less. If you're worried, if you're nervous and you're anxious, right, which we all are, of course, channel it into good works. Become an information warrior for Joe Biden and the Democrats. Make your calls for Tom Suozzi, right? Many of you worked on Tom Keene's race last week. I will tell you, I spoke to the Keene people on election day. They didn't think they were going to win. The people in the Virginia House in November, they didn't think they were going to win either. We keep outperforming our own expectations of what's possible, in part because of all of you, right? And I'll just close by, pull this thing to a close by saying one of the central reasons I think we're performing so well in race after race all over the country is that we've built a superior machine to theirs. We have 2 million, 3 million people who are fighting to make sure that their democracy doesn't slip away. And that machine that we have is pushing our performance in race after race all across the country to the upper end of what's possible. The money we're raising is building the largest campaigns we've ever had. Those large campaigns are allowing us to control the information environment and then build the biggest voter contact and GOTV operations that we've ever had. And we have more volunteers to plug into those operations than we've ever had because of remote texting and phoning and and postcarding and all the things that. We've built a better machine than they have. And it's one of the reasons we keep winning. Youngkin was obsessed with the early vote in Virginia because they feel like they're getting their ass kicked. And that's organizational strength. And so what they have identified, what Republicans have admitted, is that we're ahead of them in organization. They may be louder than us. They may have a little bit more money than us, but we have each other, and we have 2 to 3, 4 million proud patriots who love their country. And all of you have just said, fuck it, I'm just not going to let my country slip away. And I'm going to go do the work to make sure that it doesn't. And we know here at Hopium that work makes the difference. We know that we've been winning elections that nobody thought we could win. And it's because we are putting our heads down and we're doing the work and getting this thing done. I'm so proud of all of you. I'm so excited to be in community with all of you. And what I laid out today in my email with the next set of things that I want to work on with all of you. Number one, everyone needs to give a little bit of money to Joe Biden and join the campaign. And I created links for you to do that on Hopium. Number two, North Carolina. Of the 7 battleground presidential states, I want to focus on expansion and growth. try to get Anderson Clayton and her team early money, early resources, early volunteers to build out the North Carolina party. So we've got a chance of flipping North Carolina in 2024. Third is that we've got Tom Suozzi in that race, and then we'll be endorsing in somewhere between 6 and 10 House races. And then we'll be looking at other things on the margins. I don't want to give everybody too much to do. All of you are part of organizations or you live in a state where there's work to be done. I want the work here at Hopium to be on top of the core work that you do. For some of you, it will be what you do, but for many of you, it will be, you won't necessarily be involved in everything we do here at Hopium, but because it will be a supplement to the work you're already doing with your groups and in your communities back at home. But these are national priorities. When I'm laying out for you, as somebody who's been doing this a long time, this is where I think our work, our dollars, our labor, our sweat can make the biggest difference. It already has. I mean, look at what we've done together, right? We helped flip the Wisconsin Supreme Court seat. We helped take away the 6-week abortion ban in Ohio. We helped flip Jacksonville, the largest city in Florida. We helped flip the state house in Virginia and take away the 15-week abortion ban. And as a result of that election, we just elected the first Black speaker in the history of Virginia, the former head, the capital of the Confederacy. And then we just won another important race in our comeback in Florida, Tom Keene. We're doing great, everybody. I'm really proud of you. I mean, but we all know that the most important work for all of us is ahead of us. The big one has come. It's here now. It's Trump and Biden. We got to saddle up. You got to make your decision about how you're going to be engaged. I really want to just stress something so importantly, which is donate $10, $25, whatever it is to Biden Harris. Just start getting involved in the campaign, getting their emails, starting to build it into your routine. This is the big one. This job one for us in 2024. There's going to be so many things to do. Job one is to win the presidential election. And everything else, in my view, is secondary in 2024. I think many of you will probably agree, right? So I want to say thanks, everybody. We're hitting time. My voice is going. Susan Wagner is going to email me and yell at me for letting my voice go a little bit. And I will say that I'm going to be on Lawrence tonight for any of you who want to watch at 10 o'clock at the top of the hour, talking about the elections. I've been able to get on MSNBC a little bit more than I used to, and it's been fun and joyful for me. And finally, I just want to say thanks, everybody. I mean, this Hopium community has been so much more rewarding and powerful and interesting and wonderful than I could have anticipated, to be honest. I work really hard because I feel very obligated to all of you to give you the best information and the best advice that I can give, because you're our superpower, as Tom said. I mean, the people around the country who are doing the work, you're giving us this opportunity to have these kind of electoral victories. And it's my job every day to give you the best information that I can, the best recommendations on where to put your time and energy. And I feel very obligated to all of you to continue to do the best work. You can hear my dog barking, by the way. Sorry about that. Tug, you can see him. He's over this shoulder here, my 11-year-old English bulldog, who's very barky, by the way. But just to conclude is that, listen, I'm just so grateful for all of you and for the paid subscribers here tonight. Your money is allowing me, giving me the justifying the time and energy I put into this. I've let go of all my outside consulting things. All I'm doing is Hopium this year. It's all I'm doing. It's my full-time job now. It's so much fun. And I think we're doing a lot of good together. Thanks, everybody. And remember, right, in every way possible, as we head into 2024, I would much rather be us than them. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.